but a fraud that is now confirmed to have exceeded the GDP of the country of Somalia itself. And Mike Lindell, in the same week that definitive voter fraud in Georgia occurred, and I should say election fraud. I mean, these are splitting hairs. Oh no, the votes were legal, but the counting was illegal. Fraud. Criminal fraud. And for those who don't know yet what is going on, and I had to, make sure I understood it, because you need to understand the nuance. You see people like, well, anybody with half a brain, Mike Benz, people on the right going to Twitter and saying 315,000 votes illegally counted in the state of Georgia. The margin of victory was under 15,000, find me 11,000 votes. When people are posting that, and then the rebuttal, the standard rebuttal is the votes were legal. It's just that the certification of those votes was illegal. Well, A, you need to make sure you understand it. And B, you need to make sure that you know how to respond to it. It was illegal. Period. This is the news of the week. Fulton County admission on unsigned voting tabulations brings back spotlight on 2020 election. Rat face burger. You've been around the channel for long enough. Robert Barnes and I were talking about this from back in the day. Am I showing you the right screen here? I am showing you the right screen. Where did it just go? Son of a bee sting. Hold on one second. Let me bring it back. My fat fingers have messed this up. Fulton County did not dispute the allegation in a complaint before the state election board this month that more than 130 tabulator tapes from 2020 were unsigned. Understand this. It was not lawfully conducted. Their argument is going to be, well, there was no difference in the outcome. We will never know. But what we were told was that it was the most fortified election of all time. It was the most unquestionably kosher election of all time. And now, after 5 years after activists unearthed this, they do not contest the fact that there is basically no chain of custody on some 350,000 early votes. Atlanta, Fulton County admissions that more than 130 tabulator tapes, the receipt-like piece of paper that contained vote tabulation information for a particular machine. Oh, by the way, they made a mistake on the machines too. Just that little receipt. You imagine having to audit or get audited, and you say to the government, yeah, my receipts are all wrong, but trust me, that's how much money I made. Jail. So the receipt-like pieces of paper that contain vote tabulation information on a particular machine were unsigned in 2020, has brought back the spotlight on Georgia's election that year. Records from the records account for virtually all of the county's early in-person votes in 2020, more than 315,000. Fulton County addressed the issue of the unsigned tapes. Listen to this. They've addressed it. Yeah, we broke the law, but it was without consequence. Here we go. In a moment that has gained international attention this week, including from such figures as Elon Musk and the Federalists. Here, listen. The county contends, in essence, because it's complicated. I don't really want to get into what they're contending. They're just contending, in essence, that poll workers 5 years ago made an administrative error that they've taken steps to resolve. Attorney Ann Brumbaugh represented the county at the hearing, said those steps include enhanced training for election workers as well as a review process on handling the paper ballots, known as tabulator tapes. The paper ballots, the paper records, known as tabulator tapes, and self-initiated investigation process if they're not signed. The tapes are part of the record-keeping and chain of custody procedure outlined in state regulations, whichever the regulations here, Georgia state rule, whatever, requires a poll manager and 2 witnesses to print 3 such tapes and, quote, sign each tape indicating that it is a true and correct copy of the tape produced by the ballot scanner. The bottom line, what they're going to say is the votes themselves were not unlawful. Just take our word for it, even though we've lied to you about this for the last 5 years. It was just the tabulations or the unsigned certification of those votes that didn't follow protocol. You've recounted, as was the argument back in the day, well, signature verification. We've recounted them. The number of the recount is accurate. The number of the recount was not what the issue was. It was matching signatures, which was never done. It was an audit of the signatures that was never done. And in this case, all that they're basically saying is 315,000 early in-person votes. There's no chain of custody. There was no legally required verification, but trust us, the votes were good nonetheless. It was not done in more than 130 in-person tapes encompassing 350 plus thousand votes. Yeah. I do not dispute that the tapes were not signed. It was a violation of the rule, a violation of the law. Just, it was criminal. But trust us, the rest of it was good. We, since 2020, have new leadership and a new building and a new board, new standing operating procedures. Since then, training has been enhanced. The poll watchers are trained specifically. They got to sign the tapes in the morning, and they've got to sign the tapes when they return at the end of the day, Bombal said in a meeting. This case is about tapes that are not signed, which is a violation of a statute, of a rule, not a statute. Bullcrap. Another distinction without a difference. But a rule they said should have been done. Like I said, if they were signed, they weren't signed, procedures have been updated. Oh, if we did it right, if we didn't, Janelle King, one of the board members, said, at best it's sloppy and it's lazy. At worst, it could be egregious. Called it troubling, yada, yada, yada. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Ratfaceberger, the man who refused to provide a meaningful audit, an actual signature verification back in the day. We talked about this at length. What did he have to say? Just making sure that we're still live because I get sometimes so engrossed. I'm nervous that I might be talking to an inactive camera. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Ratfaceberger said in a statement Saturday that all voters who were verified with photo ID and lawfully cast their ballots. A clerical error at the end of the day does not erase valid legal votes. You never did signature verification. Never, Ratfaceberger. And sorry, by the way, do not expect me to believe that you didn't break the law in other respects when you acknowledge 5 years later that you broke the law in the chain of custody of the votes that you are now claiming were totally legit, but you have no way of verifying the chain of custody. Ultimately, the SEB vote 3-0 to refer the case to the Georgia Attorney General's office for possible sanctions, as well as requesting a $5,000 fine for each missing. Oh yeah, $670,000. We'll just take it from the taxpayers. As a related but separate matter, there were 10 of 148 tapes missing entirely. Oh yeah, just what was the margin of victory? The subject of another earlier complaint. Those encompass more than 20,000 votes, which became the subject of a claim in 2023 that they didn't exist. Remember when Trump said, "Find me the votes"? Oh, and they tried to prosecute him for that, RICO. They were actually breaking the law. They actually can't account for more votes than was the margin of error. And they prosecuted Trump for saying, "Find me the missing votes," arguing that was election interference, not what they've just admitted to having done here 5 years later. Spokesperson for Georgia Secretary of State's office at the time, Mike Hassinger, said the poll tapes are part of how votes are recorded, multiple ways to provide redundancy and security. A scanner that didn't produce a poll tape would have no effect on the number of validity of the votes casted. Well, we're going to take your word for it. Poll tapes are not supposed to go missing, but precincts are managed by human beings who sometimes make mistakes. That's amazing. And elections are not supposed to be fraudulent, but they're run by people who sometimes commit fraud. But trust us, we broke the law here. We failed to verify the chain of command. We've now apparently have 20,000 missing votes because we can't actually find the tabulators or whatever. But trust us, it was good. And Trump was the one engaging in election interference. Cross, who brought the complaint at issue this month, presented a competing version of the seriousness of poll tapes. These are not clerical errors. They are catastrophic breaks in chain of custody and certification. You can hear both sides of the arguments, and I want to make sure I understand them. And then you can decide which one makes sense and which one doesn't. We broke the law, but trust us, it was a good election is not going to convince anybody except for the beneficiaries of that breaking of the law because they wanted the election to be stolen. Adding that the lack of signatures on the tapes meant that Fulton County had no lawful authority to certify its advanced voting results to the Secretary of State, yet did. That spoke to a deeper, more ongoing debate about the mishandling, yada, yada, yada. Some reports on the Fulton admission have referenced the county illegally certifying the votes with unsigned poll tapes. A ruling by Fulton County Judge Burney in another matter on certification held in 2024 said that they must certify their results, quote, under any circumstance. The Georgia Court of Appeals upheld that ruling in July, emphasizing how state law uses the word shall in relation to certification and citing a, quote, mandatory duty to certify election results. Doesn't matter how it was done, just certify something. King at the December 9 meeting acknowledged that standing law, but disagreed with it. I know according to the new law, now you have to certify even if there's missing tapes. I get it, even if the data is wrong, even if we have elections. Where there's clearly been some improprieties where the board members do not want to certify. But according to the law, you got to do it anyway. That's insanity. The notion of nullifying votes or decertifying an election, they're asking them to decertify this based on the conduct. Federal Judge Timothy Batten, yada, yada, yada. Bush appointment. Let's see what he says here. They ask the court to order the Secretary of State to decertify the election result as if such a mechanism even exists, and I find that it does not. That's fine. It's unclear, following the board's vote to send the case to the Attorney General's office, whether there might be movement on the case, yada, yada, yada. We at the end here? I mean, it's amazing. This is in an election where you will recall there were pipes breaking, counting into the late night hours, allegedly bags appearing out of nowhere, allegedly bags being pulled out of tables. And now 5 years later, they're basically saying there was no chain of custody, not chain of command, but certification. And we broke the law, but we've implemented some protocol. So don't worry, it won't happen again.